All right, this video is going to walk you through how to find the probability of a single event. The first thing I could do is I could shuffle up a bunch of cards in this deck here and then ask you, what are the chances that I'm going to pull out a 7 from the deck of cards? The way you write that mathematically is you just put a capital P for probability, put a 7 in the parentheses, and then think about how many 7s are in the deck. The first thing you have to do is understand that we're doing part over total. I'm looking for 7s in the deck. The part I'm looking for then is that there are 4 7s. I have a 7 of spades, I have a 7 of hearts, a 7 of diamonds, and a 7 of clubs. So there are 4 cards in this deck that have a 7 written on them. So that's going to be the part that I'm looking for. Then the total is about how many I'm going to have a chance to pull from. I have 52 cards in this deck. So I write it like this. Then from here, what you have to do is reduce the fraction. The answer to this question then will be 1 over 13. I hope you could also come up with that fraction in your head. But you may be, on some cases, having a challenge to find the actual fraction yourself reduced. So if you use your calculator and you do the calculation, you put in 4 divided by 52 and hit enter, you'll get a decimal. If it ever runs off your screen, we would like you to turn it to a fraction that's reduced by pressing math, enter, enter. And when you do that, you get the reduced fraction I just mentioned, 1/13. So that's the fraction answer. But recognize also that probability answers can also be written as a decimal. The decimal in this case being 0.077. And that's the decimal form of it, 0.077. And then you can also write the answers also as a percent. If you're going to write a decimal as a percent, you just move the decimal place 2 places to the right, or multiply your answer by 100, and that'll accomplish the exact same thing. So this is going to give you an answer of 7.7%. Now what I don't like as much about these last two is that they're approximate. They are not as exact as the 1/13. So if you really want to know what's the best one to put in your homework, the most exact one is the fraction, especially when the decimal runs off your screen. If the fraction terminates on your screen or is rational, then it's going to be one that you can write as a decimal and still be okay. Now also, you're going to be asked some questions about rolling a die or some other kind of single event where you roll a die and something else comes up. So what are the chances that you're going to get a 4 or possibly a 6 on the one roll? So it might have an or written in the question as well. So it says probability of getting a 4 or getting a 6. Well, I know that there's only one 4 in the die and there's only one 6 in the die, and they each have a 1/6 chance of happening. So what that looks like in an or situation is you take the chances of the first one happening, which is 1/6. There's a 1/6 chance you're going to roll a 4, and then you add the chances of the other one, so plus 1/6 of the other one. So it's 1/6 plus 1/6, and if you reduce that down by simplifying and adding, you're going to get 2/6, which then reduces down to 1/3. So 1/3 is the fraction answer. You could also write it as 0.3 repeating, and so on. And that's what single events look like. So single events could look like you rolling a die, pulling a card, flipping a coin. Those are very common. You're going to also recognize spinners as well. Spinners like this, where you might have to spin the spinner and try to figure out probabilities of those kind of things. So let me just talk about the spinner part of this next. So the spinner is going to ask you about, well, wait a minute. What about, what's the probability that you're going to spin? And they put a capital B right here. You have to kind of think about the problem and ask yourself, what is B referring to? In this case, it's obviously referring to a word that uses the letter B, in that case it being blue. And as you look at the spinner, it's half the spinner is blue. And again, we can take a decimal version of that, 0.5, or a percent version of that, which is going to be 50%. So then I can write all 3 of those, and either one of those will work in the computer for your answer when answering questions on homework. Now, there is another thing I want you to think about. There are some other unique ways of writing problems that ask about what is not part of that probability. So I want you to be aware of these 4 not ways of noting how to do the calculation when it's a not situation. So you might actually have them write out the word not. So if it says P and then not A, with the word not, it's pretty straightforward. You want to figure out what fraction of this circle is not aqua. Well, if it's 15% aqua, that means then the remaining percentage that's not aqua is going to be 85%. Now, if again you want to use a decimal 0.85 or the fraction for that also, that would be fine, but 85% is a good way to write the answer for this situation here. Now, you might also get a question that might say P with an A for aqua, and then it has an apostrophe next to it. That apostrophe means complement, and the word complement means whatever's left over. So if we're referring to the 15% that aqua makes up, the leftover amount, which is not A, is also going to be 85%. Okay? So if you ever see the apostrophe, that's also referring to not A, which is 85%. You might also see the word complement written out as a full word. So if it says complement like this, like that, complement of, and then it says P and then A. That means find the probability of A, and the complement means the leftover amount that's left that's not A. And again, that's another example of what not A looks like. And then finally, the last one, it might say the probability of A, and it might put a little superscript C up in the upper right corner, and that C is referring to the word complement, which also again means the leftover of A, which if A is 15, the leftover amount is 85% or 0.85 and so on. That would also be your example of not, okay? I've got one more thing to point out to you, which is the idea of what does equally likely mean. If I ask you about rolling this die, every side that I roll here on the die is going to have a 1/6 chance of happening. So every outcome on this thing has an equal chance of happening. So a die is an example of equally likely experiments. But in this case over here, in the case of the spinner, you'll notice this is not equally likely because you have a 1/2 chance for blue, you got 15% chance for aqua, 10% for the green, and then also 25% for purple. Notice that all those are different. Even if I had all, like 5 that were all equal size, but then there's one section that was not equal, then it would still not be equally likely. Every outcome has to have the same chance of happening. The spinner doesn't, and the die does. So lastly, we have to talk about decks of cards, because decks of card questions are going to come up a lot in our homework as well. You need to know how a deck of card is put together. There are 4 suits: clubs, spades, hearts, and diamonds. Each suit has 13 cards. And then within those 13 cards, you're going to find these ones that have special pictures on them. Like for example, this one right here. That's a face card because it has a face on the card itself. So if it ever says the word probability of a face card, or it just says probability of face, like this, that means you're going to have to answer the question is, what are your chances of pulling out a face card? Now, if that's the case, then you would say, well, count them up. I've got 1, 2, 3, and then I've got 4 of those. That makes a total of 12. So you have a total of 12 out of the 52 cards, and as you reduce that down, it will reduce down to 3 out of 13. If you use the math enter button, you can get it that way too, but that's how you'll figure out questions when it says the word face. That can sometimes be confusing. Other things to note is that if we're talking about red versus black, half of the deck is red and half of the deck is black. So if you're colorblind, we got 2 suits that are black, clubs and spades, and the red ones are hearts and diamonds. The next thing is each suit, as you look at the card in the back of this right here, they're all broken up into fourths. 1/4 of the deck is spades, 1/4 of the deck is hearts, 1/4 is diamonds, and 1/4 is clubs. And there's 13 in each suit, so that's how you get the 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, 1/4. All right, and then lastly, as we continue to close this up here, if I ask you questions like this, if I asked you this question right here, if I said, what is the probability of getting a red card, you'd just say half, right? The chance of you getting a heart, again, there's 1/4 of the deck that's hearts, so you'd say 1/4 for that answer. Face cards, I've already addressed that one. That's a 3 out of 13 chance because the card has to have a face on it. And then next one, if it has an apostrophe, the chance of you not getting a 2. Remember, there are 4 2s in the deck of cards. So 4 of the 52 are 2s, so what is not 2? Well, then that would have to be 48 cards out of the total. So then again, for that one that says probability of not getting a 2, you would then say 48 out of 52. 48 out of 52, and then I would then say that's the same as saying 12 out of 13 if you reduce the fraction down for those kind of things too. So the apostrophe, make sure you're keeping your eyes open for those because it does show up and some people sometimes forget, and then that's how that works. And when it says the probability of even, just to clear that up real quick here too, there are 5 even cards, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. That's 5 cards in one suit, and then you have 4 suits. So when you do that one right there also, you'll have a 5/13 chance of that happening as well. So moving on from there, hopefully we can get you to think about the big ideas of this intro section of our chapter. Don't forget, when we have a single event happening, like rolling a die, and we ask you what's the chance of getting a 6, the part is 1 because there's only one side with a 6 over the total 6. Next, you might get an OR question, probability of getting an OR problem where you have a 2 or a 4 on the die showing up. Add their chances together and reduce the fraction. Lastly, there are 4 ways to say the word not, and I hope you can see that already on the screen here too as well. That the apostrophe, the word not, the little superscript C, and the word complement mean all the leftover that is not part of that outcome you're looking at. That's it, and hopefully this video helps, and good luck in your first section of probability.